I heard it on the X.
I need somebody help, not just any over me.
11 things you might not know about the Beatles. Please hit like and subscribe. Number 11. Abbey Road behind the cover. On August 8, 1969, on a street in northwest London and almost directly outside Abbey Road Studios, one of the most famous ever album covers was photographed. That photograph would turn an ordinary zebra crossing into one of the most recognizable street locations in the world. Apparently based on a stickman sketch by Paul McCartney, the photo shoot was hastily put together with photographer Ian McMillan, reportedly getting his shot in around 10 minutes, as a police officer held traffic at bay for the Fab Four to cross the road. McMillan climbed up on a stepladder and had the band cross the street back and forth 3 times. Then, using his Hasselblad camera, he fired off a total of 6 shots. Paul McCartney looked at the photo proofs and decided that frame 5 was the best. The Fab Four were in the same stride in the center of the road. It was as good as it gets, for the short time they had to take the photos. Another interesting fact was just before the photos were taken, John, George, and Ringo were working 2 songs, I Want You and The End. Paul was also working separately in the studio on the song Oh Darling. Before the session began, they stepped outside of number 3 Abbey Road to be photographed for the cover. Abbey Road remains a must-visit for any true Beatles fan, the place to go to recreate the famous strides of the Fab Four, in one of the last ever images taken of the group all together. Number 10. She literally came in through the bathroom window. Songwriters have to get their inspiration from somewhere. Often it's from personal experiences, much like McCartney did for the song She Came In Through the Bathroom Window. Intrigued? Well, this song from the medley section of Abbey Road was inspired by something that happened to the famed Beatle. A fan actually used a ladder to climb up into Paul's bathroom window via his back garden, and proceeded to steal a picture of his father, some clothes, and some slides of photos taken by Linda Eastman, later Linda McCartney. Creepy, right? Well, at least she got a Beatles song about her out of this. Number 9. Number 9. Number 9. I just couldn't resist. My Friends Have Lost Their Way. The song Blue Jay Way, penned by George Harrison at a house on Blue Jay Way in the Hollywood Hills in Los Angeles, has led to repeated thefts of the actual Los Angeles street sign. The song was composed on August 1, 1967, at 1567 Blue Jay Way. George Harrison's songwriting contribution to the Magical Mystery Tour soundtrack was written while he was waiting for the Beatles' publicist Derek Taylor, who was lost in fog in the Los Angeles canyons. Harrison stated, to keep myself awake just as a joke to fill in time, I wrote a song about waiting for him in Blue Jay Way. There was a little Hammond organ in the corner of this rented house. I messed around on this and the song came. There's a fog upon LA, and my friends have lost their way. Number 8. The Beatles behind the name and logo. Although it was never shown on the Beatles' original UK albums, the Beatles' famous Drop T logo was a familiar sight throughout the group's early years. It adorned Ringo Starr's drum kit from 1963, has since endured as the Beatles' official mark, and was registered as a trademark by Apple Corps in the 1990s. But how did it come about? As the exclusive supplier of Ludwig drums, the store wanted the Ludwig logo to be prominent. Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager, agreed, as long as the Beatles was also written on the kit. The shop's owner, Ivor Arbiter, on the spot designed the famous Drop T logo, hastily sketched onto a scrap of paper. The capital B and dropped T were to emphasize the word beat. Drum City was paid £5 for arranging the artwork, which was painted onto the drumhead by Eddie Stokes, a local signwriter. Now the name. But the whole story of the Beatles' name began in 1957, when young Mr. Lennon assembled his skiffle group, first calling it the Quarrymen. The group went through several name changes, including Johnny and the Moondogs. Then in 1960, when John Lennon's best friend from art college, Stu Sutcliffe, had joined the band as the bass player. The story goes that the two were discussing possible band names and came up with The Beatles, as they were huge fans of Buddy Holly and the Crickets, as a way of emulating their heroes. A short time later, John changed it to The Beatles, a play on words, as they were a beat band. Ironically, in 1964, John sang, "I Call Your Name," which he did. Number 7. Norwegian Wood is not the name of a house. For Lennon, Norwegian Wood, "This bird has flown," was an allusion to an extramarital affair. For Harrison, it meant the breakout song for his defining instrumentals on sitar. But the real head-scratcher of a song title actually refers to the cheap furniture of the average 1960s bachelorette apartment. McCartney remembers a lot of people were decorating their places in wood, Norwegian wood. It was pine, really, cheap pine. But it's not as good a title, Cheap Pine, baby. So it was a little parody, really, on those kind of girls who, when you'd go to their flat, there would be a lot of Norwegian wood. Had the song been written today, it might have been called IKEA Furniture. Number 6. Beatlemania, the first US shows. Beatlemania exploded internationally as a result of the group's televised performances on The Ed Sullivan Show in February 1964, the first of which, on February 9th, garnered a record-breaking 73.9 million viewers.
Four of the nicest youngsters we've ever had on our stage, the Beatles. Bring them on!
Two days later, the lads performed their first official show at the Washington Coliseum. Subpar amplification coupled with screaming from throngs of teens made the band hard to hear. The stage was placed in the center of the crowd, forcing members of the band to move their equipment around the stage during the performance in order to face each section of the audience. This was especially inconvenient to drummer Ringo Starr, who was responsible for moving his large drum kit about numerous times throughout the night. Earlier in December, a 15-year-old Maryland girl named Marcia Albert saw the group on the news and wrote her local radio station asking, "Why can't we have music like that here in America?" When a DJ tracked down a copy of their still unreleased single, "I Want to Hold Your Hand," the song became a massive hit. Capitol Records had to scramble to get the single onto record store shelves, and it went on to sell 1 million copies in a matter of days. Ringo summed it up with one word as he recalls the first visit to the U.S. on David Letterman in 1995.
Like when you guys came to the United States, then from the ride in right here to the center of town.
Crazy.
Yeah? All right, we'll be right back with Ringo Starr with some more of those fascinating details.
Some newspapers still tried to dismiss the British hitmakers as a passing fad, but the numbers didn't lie. Beatlemania had taken the United States by storm. Please hit like and subscribe. Number 5. Helter Skelter, Behind the Song. The Who's newest song at the time, I Can See for Miles, had been described as dirty, gritty, and unlike anything of its time. This distinguishing description led McCartney to push the boundaries just a bit further, resulting in the Beatles' White Album song, Helter Skelter. McCartney highlighted both meanings of the term through his opening lyrics. "When I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide, where I stop and I turn and I go for a ride, till I get to the bottom and I see you again." The song is commonly known for Charles Manson's adaptation of the term as a foundation for his theory of turning its chaotic theme into one of anarchy and violence. The lyrics, however, uphold McCartney's intentions, focusing on the turbulent nature of both the amusement park ride and a sexual relationship. That would be a ticket to ride. Number 4. Behind the cover, Sgt. Pepper's. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is not only considered one of the best rock albums ever recorded, but its complex artistic design has made it one of the most iconic images from the second half of the 20th century.
It was 20 years ago today when Sgt. Pepper taught the band to play.
McCartney is quoted as saying, "I thought, let's not be ourselves, let's develop alter egos so we're not having to project an image which we know. It would be much more free." What would be really interesting would be to actually take on the personas of a different band. As for the name, McCartney recalls the origin in a recent interview.
I was coming back on a plane, and I was with our roadie, Mal. He said, "We pass the salt and pepper." And he said, "Salt and pepper." I said, "What?" He said, "Salt and pepper." And I thought he said Sgt. Pepper.
On March 30th, 1967, the Beatles gathered at Chelsea Manor Studios to shoot the cover. The band members were asked to make a list of all the people they would want to be included in the crowd of famous people surrounding them. The crowd included cardboard cutouts of the band members' wax figures from Madame Tussauds as well. It is easy to literally see that the Beatles saw themselves in a broader cultural context than being merely musicians and songwriters. Some might say they got a little help from their friends. Number 3. Yesterday-Scrambled Eggs? Paul McCartney provided a breakdown of how he constructed the song Yesterday, one of his most famous compositions for the Beatles.
And I didn't have any words, so I called it Scrambled Eggs. Scrambled eggs, oh my baby, how I love you. I think the difference between me and a lot of people is they often dream about music, but they don't remember it. But for some reason, this melody just kept going round and round my brain. So I was near a piano, so I kind of remembered it and blocked out some chords. A couple of months later, I put some words to it.
McCartney continued to explain that for some time, the song was known as Scrambled Eggs as he tried to find the correct lyrics, and he would often irritate his friends and colleagues, including film director Richard Lester, who at the time was working with the band on their 1965 film, Help. It got to the point where the film's director, Richard Lester, started to get annoyed at always hearing the song. One day he shouted, "If I hear that once more, I'll have the bloody piano taken away." McCartney added that later, when the song was released on the band's 1965 album, he sent a copy of the song to Richard Lester with a note that read, "I hope you like scrambled eggs." Many believe it's the greatest song ever written. Perhaps it's a good thing that Paul changed the title. Number 2. Twist and Shout? No 4 people on Earth were more productive on February 11, 1963, than the Beatles. On that momentous day, the lads from Liverpool recorded 10 songs that would appear on their debut album, Please Please Me. At the very end of the 12-hour session, they tackled Twist and Shout, a raucous number that required an already hoarse John Lennon to completely shred what remained of his voice. "The last song nearly killed me," Lennon said of Twist and Shout in 1976. "My voice wasn't the same for a long time after. Every time I swallowed, it was like sandpaper. I was always bitterly ashamed of it because I could sing it better than that. But now it doesn't bother me. You can hear that I'm just a frantic guy doing his best." The Beatles' version of Twist and Shout has been called the most famous single take in rock history. Talk about utilizing your time. Number 1. A historic rejection. Decca Records. On New Year's Day 1962, the Beatles drove from Liverpool to London and auditioned for Decca Records. They recorded 15 songs in just over an hour, 3 of them Lennon-McCartney originals. But Decca opted to pass on the Beatles, and instead signed local rockers Brian Poole and the Tremolos. The label also famously told Beatles manager Brian Epstein that guitar groups are on the way out. The Decca disappointment was a blessing in disguise. After the failed audition, the Beatles found producer George Martin, signed with EMI, and replaced original drummer Pete Best with Ringo Starr. Things also turned out okay for Decca. They signed the Rolling Stones the following year. And the rest is history. I heard it on the X.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles!
All right, Elvis has left the building.
Thanks for watching.
I heard it on the X.
Tell them you heard it on the X.